All right, guys, so we got this to work. We have our unit circled, and we're going to go through and fill in important things. Before we do that, we're going to write out our special triangles. So our 30, 60, 90, and our 45, 45, 90. So somewhere on your paper, at the top, the bottom, any corner, you're going to go ahead and create your special rights. I think that's a pretty good little 30, 60, 90 ended here. So I'm going to call this my 30, 60. So we're 30, 60. I don't know. Keep me on your toes. 1, 2, square root of 3. 1, 2, square root of 3. Okay. Then I'm going to do my, do those look equal distance? I'll pretend that they are. And therefore, these are going to be my 45s. And that's going to be 1, 1, square root of 2. Agreed? All right. Now we're going to go through and label our quadrantal angles, which we talked about in unit 1. So our quadrantals go around. We're on our axis. So this is our positive x-axis. Starting here, we have 0 degrees. Then we're going to go to 90. Then we go to 180. Then we go to 270. And we come back to 360. Are we comfortable with the quadrantals? Yeah? All right. After that, we're now going to do our our 45s. So we're going to do our 45s. So your 45 is halfway between 90, correct? Yeah. So we have 45 degrees. And we're going to find the rest of the part. So if I'm halfway between, and we're going to keep going. So we're going to make a 90-degree turn here, right? So what would be the halfway here? 135. That's not the halfway. Thank you. Nope. Nope. Which is why I was trying to make the video work. It's important. Is that 135? 135. What's halfway between 180 and 270? 225. What's halfway between 270 and 360? 315. Okay, these are our 45s, right? They all have a reference angle of 45 degrees. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Now we're going to do all of our angles that have a reference angle of 30 degrees. So from 0 to here, this is a reference angle of 30 degrees. What would be the reference angle here for 30 degrees? 150. Is that 80? 30? 90? Yeah. Reference angle of 30 puts me where? 210. Reference angle of 30. 330. Okay. My last set of reference angles that we're going to be using are 60. So a reference angle of 60 is going to put me in quadrant 1 at 60. A reference angle of 60 in quadrant 2 is going to put me at 120. A reference angle of 60 in quadrant 3 puts me at, and a reference angle of 60 in quadrant 4 puts me at 300. So now we put in all of our angles based on the reference angle. Okay. After that, now we're going to talk about our ordered pairs. When we did sine, cosine, and tangent of our quadrantals in unit 1, we talked about that meaning that we're using x and y's, right? And in their purest form, that means if I'm looking for 0 degrees, it's going to be your x is a number and your y is 0. But because this is a unit circle, that means we're going to let x be 1 and y be 0. So the ordered pair here would be 1, 0. What makes the ordered pair significant is because the ordered pair tells us it's cosine and it's sine. So we know that the cosine of 0 is 1. The sine of 0 is 0. As long as I know cosine and sine, can I find all the 4 other ones? Yes. Secant, cosecant, tangent, and cotangent. Yes, because they all are related to cosine and sine. We're going to go to 90. If I'm at 90 and I'm a unit circle, that means that my x is now 0 and my y is now 1. So my point is 0, 1. So this is 0, 1. And again, this is my cosine, this is my sine. If I come here, again, this is a unit circle. My cosine is now negative, my x is now -1, and my sine is now 0. Again, this is the cosine, this is the sine. Unit circle, this point on the circle would be 0, -1. And your x is your cosine and your y is your sine. In chapter 1, we made a table of our quadrantal values. Now you have it splayed out for you using sine and cosine of the unit circle. Okay? And it doesn't matter what the point is because your 0 and your 1 are still going to be ultimately what it simplifies down to. Okay? All right, so questions about the ordered pairs for your quadrantals. Okay, so from here, we learned that cosine, comma, sine is going to make our x, comma, our y. That's going to apply to every single point. So in quadrant 1, if we're looking at 30, angle 30, to find its cosine, we're going to use our special triangle, right? So the cosine of 30, so we're here at 30, we're going to use 30. Cosine means what? It's your A over H, your adjacent over your hypotenuse. So looking at 30, what's my adjacent? Square root of 3, what's my hypotenuse? So therefore, the cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2. So its x value at this point on the circle is square root of 3 over 2. Huh? Oh, I meant to do it in blue. No. I wanted the colors to match. And then I grabbed the wrong blue. The struggle is real. Look here, Andrew. I was going to figure that out. Okay, so now I need to know the sine of 30. The sine of 30 means opposite over hypotenuse. What's my opposite? What's my hypotenuse? 2. So the ordered pair for 30 on a unit circle is square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. Okay, this ordered pair applies to all angles that have a reference angle of 30. Okay, but you have to pay attention to where they fall. So every angle that have a reference angle of 30 is going to have the ordered pair square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. So in quadrant 2, that means at 150, it's going to be perfect. Negative square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. That's because in quadrant 2, your x's are negative and your y's are positive. Does that make sense? And quadrant 3, the next angle that is 30, that has a reference angle of 30 is 210. But in quadrant 3, what are your x's and y's? Both are negative. Square root of 3 over 2 and negative 1/2. In quadrant 4, my angle that has a reference angle of 30 is 330. And what are the signs in quadrant 4? Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to do our 45s. So 45 means I'm using this triangle, right? What is the cosine of 45? 1 over the square root of 2, which makes it become what? Square root of 2 over 2. Okay, and luckily the sine and the cosine are going to be the same. So as I go around my unit circle, filling in all the angles that have a reference angle of 45, it's going to be the same, but I have to pay attention to the signs. So we now have a negative square root of 2 over 2 positive square root of 2 over 2. Negative square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. Positive square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. All right, lastly, angles with the reference angle of 60 degrees. So angles with a reference angle of 60. We're first going to find the cosine of 60. What is the cosine of 60? 1 over 2. Good job. And then the sine of 60 is going to be? Perfect. Square root of 3 over 2. So for all angles with a reference angle of 60, it's going to be the same, except you pay attention to the signs. So we're at negative 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. We're at negative 1/2 negative square root of 3 over 2. We're at positive 1/2 negative square root of 3 over 2. The purpose of this is to be a visual representation of your quick points, your important points, your values, your significant points and trig. Okay, yes. If so, they're in the bucket over there. Okay, so making sure we're good. In quadrant 1, what's positive? Everything. All are positive and nothing is negative. In quadrant 2, what's positive? Your y. So therefore, sine and cosecant are positive. And then your cosine and secant and your tan and cotangent are going to be negative. In quadrant 3, what's positive? Tangent and cotangent. And therefore, sine and cosecant are negative. And cosine and secant are negative. And then in quadrant 4, what's positive? Cosine and secant. And therefore, our sine and cosecant are negative, and our tan and cotangent values are going to be negative. Okay. As we keep going, we're going to end up filling in the last blank, which are called radians. We're just not there yet.
So I did all of them for nothing?
I mean, you already knew them, so good job. It's never for nothing.
Back on that, please.
All right. Okay, so this is the beginning of our unit circle. So how this works, for example, if I asked you, Justice, what is the sine of 225? Can you quickly tell me what it is? Huh? What is it? There we go. Okay. Those empty spaces we haven't learned yet. Well, they're called radians, and we're not there yet. They're not terrible. Ignore Andrew. Okay. All right. How do you feel about the unit circle? Do we see how it's a reference guide? Like that's the purpose of it, is to be a reference guide. So now, if I ask you what's the cosine of 90, you need to be able to tell me what? Cosine of 90? 0. The cosine of 90 is 0 because cosine is the x value of that angle, right? Yeah. All right. Cool. Awesome. All right. Unit circle is. Huh? Hold on. I'm going to stop this.